Hey guys, Dustin Myers here. I have the privilege of being able to call myself a World Hope Bible Institute faculty member by the grace of God. And I just kind of wanted to list out a couple of the blessings or benefits that I've seen come through my time on the field teaching for the Bible Institute. First for myself and then my church, and then in my mind, what's most important in this context is the students in these institutes all over the world, underserved, under-resourced, sometimes persecuted pastors, and they get theological training. That's a great thing in itself. For me personally, the benefit has been, pretty simple. The best way to learn is to teach. And so as I bring the message of the gospel and then good biblical doctrine through this great curriculum that we have at World Hope, as I bring that to different places, I get to see it applied in different contexts. I get to wrestle with different questions that back here in northwest of the U.S., I just never see some of these problems. And yet these questions get thrown at me. They seem new. They seem maybe a little bit too difficult to answer. And yet we've got this book, it's like it's all right here. So we just dig around in God's book and we find these answers, and they're real and they're helpful, solid answers that these guys can implement in their lives and know God's will and then live in obedience. It's a great thing to just see that be lived out and to see that cycle complete itself of learning and repentance and obedience and learning and repentance and obedience. And so it helps me to learn the gospel from so many different angles that I wouldn't have gotten a chance to otherwise. Now for my church, I'm a pastor, and so I bring all of that back, and I'm preaching sermons and I'm discipling people and helping people separate truth from error, and all of this learning, this wisdom that you get to gain on the field just gets dumped right into the local church. I remember recently having a conversation with somebody about the wrath of God, which for us, this is a difficult doctrine because, the question is, how can God be so mean? And I had just gotten back from a place where the justice of God was talked about not as something that we have to figure out and make that okay in our minds. Like, oh, I got to be okay with God, even though he administers judgment. For them in that context, the wrath of God was a real relief, just to know there's a judge out there that will administer justice. Because right now, I'm not getting any. And someday all of this will be put right. And so just to have that perspective that sometimes these are Western problems. Sometimes we call them first world problems, but there are different problems other places that the Bible addresses. And then their perspective on our problems with biblical doctrine or Christian living can sometimes be a real help, just to say, okay, maybe this is how we see this doctrine, or maybe this is how we can obey this passage. So we get taught by these students as we get to teach them. And so it's a benefit to me. It's a benefit to the church. And lastly, in my mind, again, the reason that we're going is because it's a benefit to the students. And just think about this in terms of the sheer numbers. So I was in West Africa, had 500 students in an institute in Côte d'Ivoire, in Ivory Coast. And so 500 students there, each of them was from a church of an average of 200 people in this church. So you've got 500 pastors and leaders getting trained in this institute, each going and affecting 200 people with good biblical doctrine. Guys, that's 100,000 souls. That's 100,000 lives that have been touched with the truth of the Bible. And just in the first generation of Christians, these pastors teach others, one generation deep, 100,000 people. Now, let's temper that a little bit, because sometimes you get 2-3 leaders from the same church. So, okay, let's knock off 20%, 80,000 people for a week and a half of my time. I mean, you talk about fruitfulness. Sometimes in our ministry context in the U.S., people tend to be kind of unresponsive. Conversions are hard fought, and it feels like we're just scratching and clawing for effectiveness and fruitfulness. But other places in the world, God's doing different things than he's doing here. And sometimes that fruitfulness can just kind of pop in front of our eyes because he has paved the way for the Bible Institute to come in. So in my mind, it goes to John 15:8, right? By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit and so prove to be my disciples. So when people ask me, should I go with World Hope? My answer, maybe it shouldn't be my first answer, but honestly, the first thing that comes to my mind is, are you a disciple? Well, yes. Then go bear some fruit. Why would we go with World Hope? Because we're disciples. That's what we do. We bear fruit in the name and by the power of God. So anyway, I just wanted to pass that along. Hopefully it's an encouragement to you, and hopefully I get to see you on the field, multiplying disciples, teaching to others what we have received and are so thankful for. All right, guys, thanks a lot.